So Gorillaz. You probably know them, right? But if you just think of them as that cartoon band, then wow, you are missing out on one of the wildest stories in modern music. We're talking about how a bunch of animated characters totally changed the game for music, art, and even technology. So let's dive in. You know, the whole thing really kicked off with this one simple but kind of wild question. What if the biggest band in the world wasn't even real? I mean, what if the faces you see plastered all over MTV and magazine covers were just made up? That was the big joke, the satirical jab that somehow, accidentally, started a global phenomenon.
See, to really understand Gorillaz, you've got to picture the world they were born into. We're talking the late 90s. Think about it. MTV was just this endless parade of shiny, perfectly choreographed boy bands and pop stars. It was all so manufactured. And for two guys sitting on their couch watching all this, it just felt completely empty. You know? Polished, perfect, but with absolutely zero substance.
So let's talk about those two guys. On one side, you have Damon Albarn, the frontman from the legendary Britpop band Blur. On the other, Jamie Hewlett, the genius comic book artist behind Tank Girl. They ended up being flatmates, both kind of reeling from some pretty big breakups, and they just bonded over how much they hated what they were seeing on TV. And that's when the light bulb went off. What if they made a band that was supposed to be fake? A band that was a giant walking, talking commentary on just how artificial everything had become.
But here's the funny thing. They didn't exactly start out as best buds. In fact, when they first met for an interview way back in 1990, they pretty much hated each other. It actually took 7 years and them becoming roommates by chance for them to finally click. And by 1998, fueled by a mutual hatred of pop music, the idea for a new band, which they first just called Gorilla, was officially born.
Okay, but here's where things get really genius. They didn't just, sketch out a few cartoons. No way. They built an entire universe. They gave these characters these incredibly detailed, twisted, and honestly, more believable backstories than a lot of actual celebrities. So, let's meet the band. First up, you've got Murdoch Nichols. He's the satanic bassist, the self-proclaimed leader, and the twisted mastermind behind the whole operation. I mean, his backstory is just pure chaos. We're talking a seriously messed up childhood, a literal pact with the devil to get his bass guitar, and this just relentless toxic ambition. He is the dark, chaotic engine that drives this band.
And then you have the voice of the band, 2D. His real name is Stuart Pott, and he wasn't exactly a natural-born frontman. Oh no. Murdoch, our satanic bassist, kinda created him by crashing a car into his head. Twice. Yeah. The first crash put him in a coma and gave him one fractured eyeball. And the second one, and I am not making this up, knocked him out of the coma, fractured the other eyeball, and left him with that beautiful, vacant, angelic voice that we all know and love. It's a lot.
Holding it all down on the drums is Russell Hobbs. He's the big, thoughtful hip-hop head from Brooklyn. But here's the thing about Russell. His incredible drumming skills, they're not entirely his. See, after his best friends were tragically killed in a drive-by, their spirits possessed him. It's why his eyes are solid white. They channel all their musical talent straight through him. The man is literally haunted by the beat.
And last, but certainly not least, the absolute heart and soul of Gorillaz, Noodle. Get this, she literally arrived at their studio in a FedEx crate. She was just a kid, couldn't remember anything, didn't speak a word of English, but then they hand her a guitar and she just rips this face-melting solo. The only word she could say was noodle, so the name stuck. It wasn't until later they found out she was actually a genetically engineered super soldier escaping from a secret Japanese government project. As you do. So you have this completely bonkers collection of characters. But here is where the story takes a turn. This whole thing, this satirical art project, it didn't just stay some clever inside joke. It exploded. This bizarre, fictional band became an actual global phenomenon. The crazy part is, they became bigger and more successful than most of the real bands they were originally making fun of. And I'm not exaggerating. Just look at the numbers. Their very first album sold over 7 million copies worldwide. That's insane. This wasn't just some quirky little side project anymore. This was a monster hit. It was so big, in fact, that it landed them in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most successful virtual band on the planet. Okay, so if that first album was this huge surprise hit, their second one, Demon Days, was the one that proved they were the real deal. This was their masterpiece. With Danger Mouse producing, the whole sound got darker, more political. It was just massive.
And the collaborations? I mean, come on. De La Soul on the Grammy-winning Feel Bad Inc., Shawn Ryder on Dare, even the legendary Dennis Hopper providing narration. This wasn't just about making good music anymore. This was about cementing a legacy.
But all this success created a pretty massive and pretty obvious problem. How in the world does a band that doesn't physically exist go on tour? And this, right here, is where Gorillaz went from being just a band to being actual tech pioneers. They had to literally invent the future of live shows.
I mean, just look at the evolution here. They started out pretty simply, right? The real musicians would play hidden behind a giant screen that showed the animations. But then they just kept pushing it. They blew everyone's minds at the Grammys with what looked like holograms. It was actually a super clever 19th century illusion called Pepper's Ghost. From there, it was a leap into record-breaking 360-degree VR videos, and most recently, full-on augmented reality concerts, where gigantic versions of the band performed in the skies over New York and London. Just incredible. But you know that iconic Grammy performance? It was way more fragile than it looked. Turns out that hologram tech was so sensitive that if the bass was turned up too loud, the vibrations would literally make the images shake and disappear. So picture this. On one of the biggest, loudest stages in the world, the real musicians had to play one of the quietest shows of their entire careers just to make the magic happen.
So when you put it all side by side, the leap in technology is just staggering. Think about it. They went from a delicate illusion that could barely handle bass on a single physical stage to a massive, global, decentralized experience where anybody with a phone could just point it at the sky and watch these giant animated characters performing between actual skyscrapers. The scale is just mind-blowing.
So, after all this time, what's the big takeaway? What is the lasting legacy of Gorillaz? Well, it's pretty clear it goes way beyond just a bunch of great songs. It's really a story about always being first. It's about constantly pushing the envelope and breaking new ground.
I mean, just look at their track record of firsts. They were the first band to ever chart a hit based only on digital downloads, way back in 2005. They have that Guinness World Record we talked about, their VR video for Saturn's Bars. It completely demolished the YouTube record for a debut. And yeah, they basically invented the idea of a massive location-based AR concert. They weren't just keeping up with the digital age. Half the time, they were the ones leading the charge.
And when you boil it all down, that's the real magic of Gorillaz, isn't it? The concept itself. It's just endlessly flexible. The music can completely change, the art style can evolve, the characters can age, die, come back. They can do anything because they're not tied to the real-world limits of their human creators. What they proved is that a virtual identity can sometimes be even more powerful, more dynamic, and in a weird way, more real than a flesh and blood one.
Which brings us to today. We live in a world filled with AI-generated art and virtual influencers who have millions and millions of followers. So you really have to ask yourself, right? When Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett came up with this idea on their couch, were they just poking fun at the pop culture of their day? Or did they accidentally write the entire playbook for the future of entertainment? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.